Good morning, everyone. Myself, Dr. Ravi Keshri, and today I will discuss about the ventricles of the brain. That is the ventricles of brain. Ventricles of the brain. In the brain, what is the ventricles of the brain? They are cavities that are present inside the brain. Ventricles of the brain are cavity. These are the cavity that are present inside the they are cavity that are present inside the cavity that are present inside the brain, and there are two lateral ventricle, the third ventricle, the one third ventricle, and the one fourth ventricle. The two lateral ventricle, these are present in the cerebral hemisphere. The two cerebral hemisphere, they are connected by the corpus callosum. The two lateral ventricle, they are connected by the corpus callosum. And when we take the sagittal section of the brain of the cerebral hemisphere, then the two lateral ventricle can be easily seen. Suppose this is the cerebral hemisphere, the two cerebral hemisphere, and we take the sagittal section from here. We take the sagittal section here, and this lateral ventricle can be seen just below the corpus callosum. That there are the two cerebral hemisphere, and we take the two cerebral hemisphere are connected by the corpus callosum, and we take the sagittal section. We take the sagittal section, and by doing the sagittal section, after sagittal section, these lateral ventricle can be seen in each of the cerebral hemisphere. So there are the two lateral ventricle. Now this third ventricle, it is a slit-like opening between the two thalami, between the two thalami, and the one fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle, it is present in between the pons and medulla, and cerebellum. Not the cerebral hemisphere, that is the cerebellum. Now, inside this ventricle, the CSF is present. What is present? The CSF, that is the cerebrospinal fluid. That is the cerebrospinal fluid is present. Cerebrospinal fluid is present inside the ventricle. The cerebrospinal fluid is present inside the ventricle, and this CSF, it is drained by this CSF. It is drained by the needle. That needle is called the lumbar puncture needle, and this lumbar puncture is done at the level of this lumbar puncture is done at the level of L3 L4 lumbar space, not at the level of L1, because at the level of L1 spinal cord ends. At the level of L1 the spinal cord ends, and to save the spinal cord, this lumbar puncture is done at the L3 L4 space. And how it is palpated? This L3 L4 space, how it is palpated? This L3 L4 space, it is palpated at the level of iliac crest, and this iliac crest, it is present in the iliac bone. The iliac bone, they are the three parts of the hip bone. One is the ilium, second is the ischium, and third is the pubis. And this iliac crest, it is bony elevation which is present in the ilium. At the level of the iliac crest, we palpate the LG-L4 lumbar space and the lumbar puncture is done. This CSF is very diagnostic. This CSF is diagnostic for various diseases like the tuberculosis meningitis, the viral meningitis, and this CSF flows from this CSF from lateral ventricle to the third ventricle, and from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. From lateral ventricle to the third ventricle, and from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle, and lateral ventricle to the third ventricle through the interventricular foramen, and from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle through aqueduct of Salvius to the fourth ventricle. The interventricular foramen and the aqueduct of Salvius from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. Thus the CSF flows and from the fourth ventricle to the central canal of the spinal cord. This CSF flows. Thus these are all about the ventricles of the brain. In the next class I will discuss about the lateral ventricle. Thank you.